Hello BookTube, I've got another video today. This is another part in my childhood books project. This was created by Paul at the Accidental Bookseller, and this is pretty much a project where you can just talk about some of your favorite books growing up, your childhood books, and just discuss them. And so I thought I've got some couple books lined up, so this is what we're doing today. I've recently done one on the Diary of Wimpy Kids series, so go check that out. But we're moving on today to probably one of my first favorite authors ever growing up, and that is obviously Roald Dahl here. I have a big stash of his children's books here. If I can pick them up, here it is. And I've read a lot of Dahl. I've pretty much read everything except a lot of the posthumous stuff, really. But I have many thoughts on Dahl, so this is why this is going to be such a fun video, because I haven't really talked about Dahl on my channel that much. But in terms of how I got into Dahl, I kind of always knew he was there. I've probably seen some of the adaptations growing up, but the first Dahl I remember reading was James and the Giant Peach and just being obsessed. Then obviously moving on to the Twits and the BFG, like the big stuff, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and the Glass Elevator and all that stuff. I've never liked Matilda though. That's like the one Dahl book I don't like, and I'll get to that later. But what made Dahl a real favorite author for me growing up was his actual non-fiction, which is a bit funny because his book Boy and Going Solo, which is Boy's about his time growing up in dorms and a lot of the injuries he went through. It's just very interesting. And also Going Solo, which is about his time during World War II and just his travels working for Shell, which is really great and interesting at the time. And so those have always been my favorite two Dahl books. His more non-fiction stuff. I've read pretty much everything by Dahl. He started off as an adult fiction writer. He'd done short stories, he'd done a handful of novels here and there. He randomly done like a nuclear war book in just after World War II, which is a bit really interesting. It's not really that good. When I look at Dahl's early career, I really see him trying to be Hemingway, really, like with a lot of the short sentences, very much that masculine energy that Hemingway shows off and flexes. But it's just not Dahl's calling, to be honest. I do like some of his earlier short stories, like the ones where the wife who kills her husband with a leg of lamb. I thought that was like the first time I really saw what we would expect to see from Dahl later on in his career. But outside of that, his novels aren't, and his early stuff isn't that good. It's really when you get to James and the Giant Peach, which was his first real kind of attempt at a children's novel where you get to really see him come to his own. It wasn't his first children's novel because he actually done a book adaptation of The Gremlins in World War II. It's not technically considered to be one of his books, really, because he wrote it for Disney, and Disney claims everything. And so but it's interesting to think his first published work was an adaptation of The Gremlins. Anyway, I thought that was a really cool fact. But yeah, I don't have any scripts for this video, so it's going to be very off cuff. And so he wrote a lot of adult books for a couple decades and just struck gold with the kids' books throughout the 70s and 80s until his death in the early 90s. And they're just such interesting novels. Dahl, as a writer, when he gets into his groove, pretty much, with kids' books, his ability to balance really dark humor with, I don't know, his prose, with his really creative prose. I feel like it's not Dr. Seussy in terms of rhyming, but I feel like it still has a very unique element to it, in a way that I don't think many authors can really follow. I think the closest is Paul Jennings, who's an Australian short story writer for middle grade. Has that kind of dark humor balance too, but I feel like Dahl just captures it more perfectly. At least set the bar for it. And it's interesting when we talk about this because Dahl has always been controversial. He's always been edited and very much banned in a lot of ways. Like everyone a couple of years ago was talking about when they State re-edited his books, and you can talk about some of them and how really nonsensical they were, because they weren't really tackling the real controversial bits that were talked about in the past. But let's talk about that because I find it very interesting, Dahl's editing controversy history, because the first wave of Dahl needs to be edited was very much with James and the Giant Peach because of some of the attitudes towards Mexican people, especially with the cockroach. There's a line about him being eaten by Mexican people, and that wasn't really taken well at the time, even for the 70s. And there's more famous ones too, obviously Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with what's the scene where the kids have to lick the walls, and one of the walls has a very explicit flavor, which I can't remember the exact word because it's a made up word, but if you read one of his adult books, he uses that that word as an innuendo for genitalia, and it's a bit weird, and that was very controversial at the time as well. You can also talk about what's the other one? The BFG, of course, with the original way the BFG was written to. His original design was very controversial. And then there's a bit more. Obviously, The Witches 2 was controversial. Like, Dahl has always been controversial and heavily edited. And he, against his wishes the entire time, he was very much like, this is just, censoring my creative vision or whatever. Very much like, this is the Nazis in terms of silencing me and all that. And I don't know, I'm kind of a bit numb to Dahl being edited because he just always has been. So I never really got that controversial side of Dahl. Like, sometimes it kind of needs to, because it's too inappropriate for children, I think, at certain times. But, or even him just using the word slut in one of his revolting rhymes books was it's really interesting. And I feel like he's just so unique, I think, when it comes to kids' books in particular. I love the drawings, of course. What can we say about Quentin Blake? He's iconic. And if I had to pick a favorite Dahl book, that's actually, in terms of his fiction, like his kids' fiction books, I have always loved Fantastic Mr. Fox, or even, again, James and Giant Peach, or the BFG. But growing up, I always loved the Twits. Like, it's just so funny. And the Twits is a great example of a novel really having two plots. Like, you got the first half with the actual two Mr. and Mrs. Twit, and then you got their pets in the second half doing their big revolt and escape and all that stuff, which I thought was really interesting. Looking back now, if I had to pick a least favorite, I've never liked Matilda. I think it's really on the nose for Dahl. Like, I don't know. I've never been gripped by Matilda. I don't think it's as clever as a lot of Dahl's other books are. I think it's just too obvious in a way that his other books aren't. And I don't know if it's because Matilda really doesn't have a lot of the gross out or that lurking darkness. I don't know what other word to use really. Compared to some of his other books, like George's Marvelous Medicine or something like that. But I don't know, Matilda just never grabbed me. I've reread it a couple times, and it literally does nothing for me. And so, yeah, that's all I have to say about Dahl. It was nice to actually make a video about Dahl because I have so many thoughts. I could keep on going, but I don't. This is so unscripted. And yeah, so let me know what you think of Dahl in the comments, because he divides people, and I get it. But at the same time, no other middle grade young, not YA, sorry, no other middle grade author has the real legacy that Dahl has, because as much as he is respected and upheld, and the literary world has kind of bent the knee to Dahl in a lot of ways, people still really don't like him. And obviously I'm not going to go into him as a person, because that's very much its own thing. I'm talking about the books too. But yeah, it's interesting to see that there will always be a looming shadow of controversy around Dahl. And I think Dahl really knew that too, and kind of not leaned into it, because I think it was just him being him. But it's interesting to see that even since his first big breakout with James and the Giant Peach, was always this lightning rod for not only the sheer amount of people he got into reading, but also, again, being such a controversial writer at the same time. The parallels between that I find really interesting. Again, we're talking about a middle grade author, and I feel like it's really interesting to talk about. And so, yeah, let me know what you think of Dahl. Have you got a favorite Roald Dahl book? Do you prefer his adult, his fiction novels compared to his kids' books? Let me know. And yeah, thank you so much for watching BookTube, and I will see you next time.